Hey, yo, what's up? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions from YouTube, Twitter, and everywhere in between and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so, let's get into it. We're going to start with a question from the algorithm, who says, do you think Perrion should be moved around the defensive line as much as he has? I would plant him directly next to Miles and let him attack three gap because it's always open. Flash always goes outside. That's not true. Miles definitely doesn't always go outside. Um, Fact is like Perrion, look, he's a developmental player at this point, right? He's going to have to learn both three tech positions, whichever gap they need him to be over, whichever responsibility. Usually the Browns and their defensive line alignments have one guy take that double team, and that's usually the opposite side of Miles, and they have one guy who's more of a rusher. But if Perrion's not at the point in his development where he can rush well, then he's not going to be in that position to be next to Miles, right? They're going to put their best rusher there. Right now, I think Jordan Elliott has showed some promise being the guy who can hold up on the double team and anchor pretty well. Perrion's not that kind of a defensive tackle. He had some issues anchoring in the first two preseason games. I don't expect that to go away his rookie year, so it's probably going to be something that continues to follow him until he fixes that in later years. Same thing goes with how they're going to use him on the other side. And, he just has to learn the game, learn to keep his pad level down. I believe in him and his potential. I believe in him and his skill set. It's just going to take time, right? Some players take a little bit longer to develop than others, but I do believe firmly that Perrion's going to be a player worth developing once it's all said and done. But I don't think it has much to do with them moving him around. I think he's fine being in the spot that he's in. But we're going to get to this next question from Ethan, who says, hey, Myles Garrett recently said in an interview he would put Jordan Elliott to be the breakout candidate this year on defense due to his physical transformation this offseason. Do I agree with Myles? I would say this. Jordan Elliott has looked a little bit different than what I've seen him in the past, physically and just how he's playing. Because, boy, he was on the way of getting out the league. And it looked like something switched on for him. He gained a bunch of weight, muscle, all that size and mass. And it looks like he's found something that works for him, and he's found the best playing weight and body for him because his play has been much better. He's much more his athletic ability stands out more at that weight than it did at like a 290, 300, which what he was sitting at before. Again, Jordan Elliott, a lot of raw ability. I always felt like his biggest weakness was his lack of strength. And you could see that play into him the first couple drives of the preseason, but it really looked like he turned on a switch, anchored down, and really just started to get some pushback and was really good the last preseason game that he played, especially towards the end of it. I'm excited to see him in this third preseason game, see if he can continue that momentum. Is he going to be an up and down player, or is who he was at the end of that game just who he is, right? So Jordan Elliott, I don't know, breakout candidate is right for him. But I would say, hey, if Jordan Elliott can be a starter for this team and be a reliable guy, and we can get one of those positions on the defensive line plugged up without having to do 1 year duct tape solutions, I'm happy with it. So, I'm hoping the best for Jordan Elliott, and as somebody who hasn't been a fan of Jordan Elliott as he's come in. The next question comes from Greg, who says, hey, Q, thanks for all the great content. I know Stefanski is too proud to give up the play calling at this point, but if you had to pick, who would you call the plays? I want Kevin Stefanski to call the plays. Now, I don't think this is a point of pride for Kevin why he's calling the plays still. I think this is just he's the most qualified person on the offense to call the plays. Nobody is more qualified than him. Maybe Bill Callahan, you could say, is more qualified, but offensive line coaches ain't usually calling plays. Between him and Alex Van Pelt, he's the dude that's qualified to do it. Straight up, he's called plays more than Alex Van Pelt. Alex Van Pelt has never called a play in an NFL game, I don't think. If he has, it's been very limited. Kevin has called plays for like 3 years now. So he's the most qualified. He's the most experienced. It makes no sense for him not to call the plays at this point. It's part of his job description. So, yeah, I don't think this is a problem of Kevin calling the plays and him being bad at it. A lot of metrics would suggest that he's really good at it. It's just you had terrible quarterback play last year. The next question comes from Ian, and we'll see if he has terrible quarterback play this year too. It's not guaranteed that quarterback play is going to be good, but at least he has more cooperation there. Next question comes from Ian, who says this: do you think of any of the undrafted free agents have a chance to crack in the final roster? I've liked what I've seen from Mike Harley and D'Anthony Bell. Mike Harley, D'Anthony Bell, some popular camp names. I would say Mike Harley, slim to none. Slim to none. That would mean they would cut Demetric Felton. They're not going to cut Demetric Felton to keep Mike Harley. I don't think so. So I would say Mike Harley, hopefully he could catch on somewhere else. I really see Mike Harley as more of a practice squad guy. I think he has a real good chance to land on the Browns practice squad. D'Anthony Bell is interesting because I think he's put together too much tape for the Browns to think that they can get him on the practice squad. It would be a good get if you can get him on the practice squad because I think he can be a good player. But he has made play after play in the preseason, has had like 2 forced fumbles, a bunch of sacks. Like he's been good. So I think if any of these undrafted guys have a shot to make the roster and steal a spot, D'Anthony Bell is a special teamer. It seems intriguing, and he has the ball instincts enough to where you might want to see if he could play a little slot corner, right? Like see if he's capable of doing that because his instincts near the ball have been pretty intriguing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they let him try that out a little bit because if he can find a niche there as a special teamer, occasional slot corner, that's a fast track to make this team if you're D'Anthony Bell. Next question comes from Ashton, who says this: with the retirement of J.C. Tretter, do you think the Browns move forward with the depth they already have, or do you think they'll sign and trade for another? Man, we've made a lot of this Nick Harris injury. I don't think it's that big of a deal, y'all. And that's no disrespect to Nick Harris. I think Nick Harris, I was excited to see what he could put up this year, but I just don't think this injury is that big of a deal for them because, one, they were prepared for a situation if Nick Harris was not able to play center at an NFL level. That's why they signed Ethan Ponick, right? To be that backup, that just in case scenario. So you knew if he's not going to be starting level, we have a starting level guy we can plug in. Unfortunately for Nick Harris, he got hurt. Hopefully he can get back, but he got hurt. So now they're going with Ethan, who's a starting level center. Not the greatest center in the world, but let's be real. How good do you need your center to be when your guards are this excellent? And the answer is you really don't need your center to be that good. You just need your center to be all right. And that's what Ethan is. And then if Ethan goes down, you got Michael Dunn or Blake Hans that you could put in there. And I think they're fine. I think they feel like there's no reason to panic and get somebody else and spend any money at a position to where they feel like they have starting quality guys behind starting quality guys behind starting quality guys. They feel like they have the depth there. And honestly, they don't really have enough space in that offensive line room to just add a body just to play center, right? Like they have so many good players that they want to hang on to that they really can't afford to do that from a roster preservation standpoint, let alone, just doing it to upgrade the center position, which is a position that I don't really feel like they need to upgrade that much. It's a fine position. That position is insulated by great play around it. There's really no reason, in my opinion. But that being said, I just don't think they go that route. I think they'll probably be fine with what they have here. The next question comes from Jason Rich, who says, it may be a hot take, but if Jacoby lights it up, 9 wins, a long shot, do you think they pull him for Deshaun, or do you think they ride the hot hand since you're saying they're not paying Deshaun for his services till next year? Okay. Whether the Browns are in playoff contention or not, and I need to get very clear on here because I don't think people understand this point. Whether the Browns are in playoff contention or not, whether the Browns have a great record or not, this season is more about Deshaun Watson getting ready for his extended stay in Cleveland than it is about making the playoffs. That is the number one objective, is to get Deshaun ready for the full season next year. Now, that doesn't mean that they're just going to out and out waste this year, right? You can still make the playoffs in that scenario. But if Jacoby has 9 wins, the coaching staff is thinking, hey, Deshaun has a lot of room for error, right? To knock that rust off. We all right. But everything Jacoby Brissett does is in anticipation of the Deshaun Watson era. And once that era starts, it doesn't matter what Jacoby Brissett does. Now, here's the bright side in this, right? Hey, Jacoby Brissett, he's not going to win the starting job in Cleveland. It's a ridiculous thought to have. But if you're Jacoby Brissett and you do go and win 9 games or, whatever it is that people aren't expecting, you're going to get paid a massive amount of money to place a quarterback next year for somebody, right? And I would be extremely ecstatic for Jacoby Brissett. And then that would mean Josh Dobbs would probably have the job here as the backup for a very long time as well. So I understand the thinking here, right? If you have a quarterback who has the hot hand and somebody's coming back, but that's what you do when it's Alex Smith. That's what you do when it's Kirk Cousins. That's what you do when it is Joe Flacco. That is what you do when it is somebody that you believe to be a mid-level to slightly above average quarterback, and then somebody steps in that you think could be great. You don't usually do that for somebody you think is a mid-level, maybe above average quarterback, which in this scenario, if Jacoby got the 9 wins, that's what we would think of him, versus somebody that you think has insane potential in Deshaun Watson. By the way, you spelled Deshaun wrong. It's Deshuan. But no, Deshaun there's no scenario in which Deshaun sits the bench once he's ready to come back, unless he gets hurt or something like that. Knock on wood. I don't wish injury on nobody. But I think there's no world in which Jacoby Brissett takes this job. Because, again, the main objective in this season, unless something else legally comes up with Deshaun Watson, is to get Deshaun Watson ready for his career in Cleveland. And whether they're under 500 and no chance to make the playoffs, those 6 games will be important to get him ready for next year. And even if they're above 500 have a chance, those 6 games are going to be important. And whatever he gets after that, if it's playoffs or not, are going to be important to set the tone for what this team is going to be going forward. But that is unfortunately and fortunately what the goal is of this season, is to get a guy that you believe to be a franchise quarterback ready to be the full-time franchise quarterback next year. That does not mean playoffs are out the realm of possibility. That does not mean that this team's going to stink this year or they're going to tank, because there's no incentive to tank. But it does mean that, hey, no matter what Jacoby Brissett does, he's going to be sitting the bench once Watson's ready to come back. Next question comes from Rakasan, who says, hey, Q, do you think about the possibility of bringing in an Emmanuel Sanders or a veteran with experience in a wide receiver room? I hear this a lot at different positions, right? Defensive tackle, it's Ndamukong Suh. We should give Ndamukong Suh a call. At center, it's J.C. Treader. And wide receiver is Emmanuel Sanders and T.Y. Hilton. We are addicted to familiarity, right? We want these players that we're familiar with, because what's unfamiliar makes us uncomfortable. But we really need to ask ourselves, how much better is Emmanuel Sanders than like Mike Woods at this point, right? And it sounds crazy, but like, remember when Dwayne Bowe was on the Browns and we thought Dwayne Bowe was still Dwayne Bowe, and it turned out Dwayne Bowe was worse than every player on a very bad Browns team? These guys aren't in the league for a reason. I understand they have cachet and a big name, and everybody's going to get excited the Browns sign them, but this is not like signing Emmanuel Sanders in 2014. This is signing Emmanuel Sanders in 2022, and he's just not the same player anymore. And the fact is, you probably can get somebody off waivers once these cut downs happen that's better than Emmanuel Sanders. So that's probably the option they're going to go with. Again, I know why people go with familiarity, because nobody's going to come on here and expect their question to get answered if they ask for, is Steven Sims a possibility for the Cleveland Browns? Even though I think that's a real possibility for him, nobody really cares about that. Emmanuel Sanders is a name people are familiar with, but I just want to reiterate to fans, like, let's not mistake familiarity with the player for that player still being good, because there's a lot of players that people are familiar with that aren't good anymore. And, there's a long list of them that aren't in the league for a reason. So that's it for that question. Thank y'all for asking these questions. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.